Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, Mosaic Maria. My name is Maria. So today I want to talk about the book, Despair. I have read it, I have reread it, and I may read it again. Okay, right from the beginning, right off the bat, what I don't like about this book, I really wanted glossy pictures. There are no glossy pictures. I'm going to spend money on a book, get the hardcover. I want glossy big pictures. There are some pictures in here before each chapter. Not glossy, they're just paper print. Today I want to talk about grief and the power of grief and recognizing the stages of grief that people can get stuck in. And then I want to talk about anniversary dates and how it is not uncommon for some people to actually die on close to or on a very important anniversary date, like their own birthday or the birthday of a parent, or maybe a parent that they always had to do something really big for, or or a death anniversary date of a loved one. So a anniversary trigger date and trauma date. How sometimes people can die on those dates, and it's very weird. It's always thought of as strange, but it actually happens more than we know, and um, it's an unconscious willing of ourselves to go. And it can happen very close to our own birthday and very close to loved ones' birthdays. So I want to talk about two different people that have had extreme grief in their life from a young child and trauma. And that would be Lisa Marie Presley, who is now passed away at a very young age. She just really should be with us still, but she's gone. Um, Lisa Marie found her father dead, and she was with him at 9 years old when he died in Memphis. And she stayed with his body for 3 days. His body stayed in Graceland. And she said in interviews that she found it comforting to be with her dad during those 3 days because everything around her was so crazy. And she thought of him, she knew he was dead, but she thought of him as being in peace, sleeping. And she kind of had an ominous feeling about death. She was always surrounded by death because in the backyard of Graceland was everyone was buried. Her grandmother, who died young, her father, her grandfather, her uncle. So she knew that one day she would be there. And now, so tragic, her son, Benjamin Knopf, was buried there in 2020 when he shot himself in the torso at her home when she wasn't there. Party going on, and he shot himself. Okay, so Lisa Marie was dealing with one. She's always been dealing with the death of her father and having to go back to Memphis, Graceland, and celebrate his birthday, or what would have been his birthday. So she's had to go on and continue to um, memorialize her father and honor her father for all the fans that want to keep Elvis alive, his memory. So they show up at Graceland and they have a big cake for Elvis and they all sing happy birthday and they get to eat cake and they go around the museum and the Presley family shows up. They look for Lisa Marie and Priscilla all the time and Lisa's children. So I look for the Presley family who's alive. So Lisa had just done that um, last Sunday. Elvis Presley would have been 88 last Sunday. Um, and then she went on to go to the Golden Globes. And within a couple days, she had very bad abdominal pains. And then she collapsed. And her first husband, Danny Knopf, who she married in 1988, I believe, or was it 88? Yeah, 1988. She met him when she was 17 in a Scientology rehab that Priscilla had put her in. And they waited 4 years before they got married because she got married when she was 20. And then they had Riley and then they had Danny. So after, or Benjamin, I'm sorry, after Benjamin passed away in 2020, Danny Canove moved in with Lisa to grieve together their child. Lisa was in total despair and grief. She had also gone through a really nasty, knockdown, drag out, nasty divorce with her fourth husband, Michael Lockwood, musician and father of um, Finley and Harper, the twin twin girls she had with him. And they were having a horrible custody battle, and the judge found that neither one of them were going to have their children, and the children went to Priscilla for a time. So Lisa was found to be doing a lot of drugs, alcohol, and then after her son Benjamin died, uh, Michael felt that the girls would not get any attention at all. That Lisa would relapse into even more drug usage, and because of her grief, and that he should have the children. And it was really a nasty custody battle for both of them. And that finally cleared, and they both got joint custody. Um, and Lisa seemed to be moving on. Um, but that takes a toll. During that time, her son killed himself. Didn't unalive himself, he killed himself. I'm not monetized, so I can say the words he killed himself. We need to be able to say he took a gun, shot himself in the torso, killed himself. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it. He had just signed a $20 million contract to start making music, and Lisa Marie had said in several interviews that she never wanted to force her children, especially Benjamin, into music because he was very talented. He did look like Elvis. He was the only grandson of the king of rock and roll, and he people would make that comparison. He have big shoes to fill, just like she did, but he would have it even more because he really resembled him. So he wasn't. His father, Danny, was a musician. She's a musician, so he had musical abilities, and she said he was very talented. So he finally had signed a $20 million music contract right before his death at 27 years old. Um, really horrible. So I don't know how a parent comes back from that. That's a kind of grief that you live with forever, and that's what Lisa was writing about. Finally spoke out was that that is a grief that doesn't leave you. It is there every day. You get up and you go on in some form, and she was doing that for her girls, but she was half dead. Her soul had died. She was not there. So um if we look at the stages of grief, the 5 stages that Helen Kubler-Ross wrote about in Death and Dying, she states that the first stage of grief is denial, the second is anger, and then bargaining, and then depression, and then acceptance. Many people feel there's actually 7. Some people feel there's 11 stages of grief. So this goes on and on. The 7 stages would be shock and denial, pain and guilt, anger and bargaining, depression, um, the upward turn, reconstruction and working through, and acceptance and hope. So the 7 stages just kind of spell out what you're actually going through and feelings you could have during that time. Helen Kubler-Ross was very known for writing Death and Dying and giving a grief model to psychologists, nurses, doctors, everyone really, on how to deal with death and dying. And really more for like hospice, but it got turned into this is how people react to death and dying. There's 5 stages, only 5 stages. And there's been a lot of tit for tat about that. The thing about all the stages of grief is they're not in any one specific order. You don't move through them fluidly back and forth. Um, you may get to acceptance and hope and then go back to depression and anger and denial and bargaining and shock all over again. And that's why grief is a universal beast that people have to live with and have to find ways to cope with when they know they're going into their dark, depressive time. Many times people describe anniversary dates like maybe their mom or their dad died and uh, it's coming time for their birthday. They always had a big birthday party for them, and so they describe it as their dark day. Today is an anniversary date for myself, my children, and some of my family members. For me, it's a dark day. Um, Dr. Martin Luther King weekend, 1992, has become probably one of the worst days of my life, and um, I approach this weekend very cautiously, and I approach it always with an eraser, an imaginary eraser in my hand, wishing I could go back, wipe out that entire weekend, wipe out every phone call I made, everything I did. Um, and before that, it starts before that. Like, I wish I would have said no to this and yes to that. And it's it's bargaining. If only I had. If only bargaining is if I had done this, maybe if I did that, maybe they're going to call, maybe it'll be better, maybe they're going to come back. Bargaining. Um, if I do this now, maybe this will happen. So it's a real part of grief. Um, Other thing is grief anniversary dates, the death of a child, the losing of a child, the the losing of your position of parenting, or um, the losing a mother or a father or a sibling, being the survivor, not talking to a person enough they died, cutting a conversation short, which Harry and Willie or William talk about that they were supposed to see their mother, Diana, the next day. They had not seen her for almost 2 months. They were supposed to get a visitation the next day. She was on her way home. She was going to be coming home. And she called to talk to them to let them know that. And both the boys cut the conversation short because they wanted to go play. And that is a real regret that Harry has. Harry has a lot of regrets. I don't know whether to call him H, Harry, Harold, Prince, Duke of Sussex, or what, like, or the spare. Um, so Lisa Marie was living in grief. Harry's living in grief. Both of these people were stuck in stages of grief. Um, Harry, part of writing this book, I'm just going to call him Harry. Harry is stuck in anger and bargaining, and he also is doing something active to reconstruct by actually moving forward and writing the book. Um, it is written in resentment, anger. There's a lot of magical thinking. What Harry went into when his mom died was shock and denial, which for a child can look like, or even for anybody, but for a child even more so, can look like that person is hiding. That person is just not coming back. They're around the corner. They'll be here any minute. Harry said, "My mom is hiding from the establishment, the family, you know, this, the paparazzi." And um, in anger and denial, you can build up an enemy even worse in your head that is the blame. So the media is the blame for Harry. Harry really believes the media is to blame, the British media, the tabloids, the paparazzi. If you watched the docuseries on Meghan and Harry and Meghan in Netflix, there's one scene where Harry and Meghan are getting into the car. It's like a 20-minute ride where they're going. And Meghan, the minute she gets in the car, is strapping her seatbelt on and putting her sunglasses on and looking at Harry all worried and grasping his hand and saying, what kind of a detour can we take to get out of this traffic? Or how long is it going to take to, how long is this trip? And she's just very, very nervous, and it's a little overacted. And it is acting. Go back and look at it. And Harry is saying, the driver is saying it's a 20-minute drive, and Megan's reminding Harry there's that one pap on a scooter bike. He's still with us, and Harry's like, is he along with us again? And they're looking out the back, they're looking out the front, they're looking all over to find this one. There's no paparazzi around them. There's nobody. But this is so built up in his head, and Megan knows this, that she's looking around, he's looking around. They're all wrenching their neck to find the there's no paparazzi. And Megan comes along and says, there was that one person recording in the garage in the basement before we got here. Just so you know. I mean, they're really built up. Even when it's good press, they think it's going to be bad. So the enemy is the paparazzi, the British tabloids, the rag sheets. They chased his mother to death. This man got into his 20s thinking his mother was still alive, hiding somewhere. He actually had to ask a detective to prove it to him, to show him the pictures of his mother dead, which he saw some of them. But what he realized right away was the paparazzi were taking pictures of his mother while she was dying, possibly while she was dead. They didn't stop. They not only chased her, they continued to take the picture. That wounded him severely, severely. He is stuck here. And in grief, we can get stuck in stages and ages. He's 12. And I was talking about how people describe when a person dies, their dark memory, or uh, the night, or the darkness around that, right? And they've gone to their dark place. Harry's book begins with, out of the night that covers me. Out of the night that covers me. Diana is the night. Okay, so she's the dark. Dark. Okay, so the entire book, I can see the stages of grief, and I could read the stages of grief, and I would read passages, but I'm not sure I can because of copyright infringement, so I won't. I'll just give some examples. He makes it seems like he understands that William, his brother, and him are experiencing their grief differently about their mother. They don't discuss their mom unless an interviewer is asking them both and they're looking back at pictures. They really don't discuss it. He never gets supported. Nobody hugs him, tells him, I'm sorry your mother died. The way he's told about his mother dying is his father tapping his knee, waking him up and saying, your mother didn't make it. She was in a car accident. So he goes on believing his mother is still alive. But he goes so far as to want to go to the tunnel that Diana and her driver and Dodie died in. And he wants to drive the speed they're saying the driver drove in the same kind of car. And he simulates it because he doesn't believe that the driver was going at that speed. So he actually drives, he puts himself into a car and drives at that speed through the tunnel to see if he'll get an accident. That is an extreme grief reaction. That is an extreme denial. That is an extreme bargaining, prove it to me kind of thing. and he is still in grief. This entire book is anger, resentment, bargaining, grief. This is how old he is in this man's body. The whole book. The way he feels about Queen Consort Camilla, the way he feels about Kate, the way he feels about his grandmother. He feels that he was special to his grandmother, more special than Willie, more special than his own father. His grandmother and him had a special connection. His grandfather, Prince Philip, and him had a special connection. He forms these alliances with people where he isolates other people. And it's kind of like what Donald Trump does, where he does this a lot. He doesn't give a specific, but he alludes to it, and everyone should know. We're just dumb if we don't know. Um, Donald Trump used to say, "I know, you know, everyone knows," and he kind of like leave it out there. He'd allude to something ominous out there, and the people that picked up on it were the mega people. Picked up on it and said, "Oh, that's it," and he just went along with it. He does that. He does that all through the book. All through the book. There are times I think I'm hearing Megan. I think I'm hearing Megan's opinion or interpretation through her eyes. Um, he has made the media the blame for his mother's death, the press, the tabloids, the crown, the establishment, the blame for everything. And there are no winners here. Nobody's going to win. In writing the book, it's basically apologize to my wife and me, admit that you did wrong, or we're gone. Well, they're gone. They're gone. He is what some people would like to say, he has put the last nail in his coffin, and his wife's and their children, they're gone. There will not be a reconciliation because there is too much trash in this book. He goes too far. He puts he's angry. He's getting all his anger out. He's resentful. Even when he's writing compassionately, he goes to that nasty, snarky place. Puts it out. That's that. Lisa Marie did that her whole life in interviews and when she came up against her mother, when they butted heads. Um, Lisa would try to be like the badass and write really revengeful music. And her version of Dirty Laundry is my favorite version. Don Henley wrote it. Only Lisa Marie could sing it in the attitude she did and really feel it, and make an audience feel those words. So her cover of that is my favorite song. Um, I think Lisa didn't stay in music very long, and some people have said she wasn't as committed to music, or she didn't get into music until late in her career. Um, she didn't know what to do. What really happened was she was always writing poetry. She was out there on MySpace for a long time writing poetry, and she was always putting it to tunes. Um, she was afraid. She was trying to find her own voice and living under the shadow of her father and comparisons. And she was afraid to go forward. And so what she did was she gave a demo tape to Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson and her were good friends from when Lisa was a child. She used to go to Las Vegas a lot. Um, she used to see the Jackson Five and Michael Jackson when he was doing a show. So they were already friends. Lisa gave Michael Jackson a tape at a time. She was like a demo tape at a time. She was looking to branch out in music. She was going through an unhappy spell with her first marriage, her first love, Danny Canove. And Michael Jackson started pursuing her during that time. And she prematurely divorced Danny Canove, married Michael Jackson. And she talked about later how she loved Michael Jackson, but she wanted to help him get off of drugs. And that was kind of how she went into the marriage. She was thinking king of rock, her dad, and king of pop, Michael Jackson. And she was thinking, here's another king. He loves my father. He's always been good to me. I want to help him. He's going through a rough time. And so she married him. After Michael Jackson, she was married to Nicolas Cage for a very short time. And what drew her to Nicolas Cage was he was the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola, and yet he didn't use the name Ford Coppola to become an actor. He made it with his own name, Nicolas Cage. So she was, during that time period, she was thinking, how can I go forward and be a musician? And I think I've seen every interview she's ever done, and she talks about this so candidly that every person she married was not a mistake, it was a learning experience. Um, so she didn't have any regrets. She just, looking back on it, she could see what she learned from it. Um, she was really drawn to his ability to pick himself up and say, "I'm going to make it as an actor. I'm going to become an A-list star," without leaning on my uncle, without using the family name. So that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to kind of break away from being Lisa Marie Presley. She wanted to be Lisa Marie on her own. But that was impossible because she was always living in the shadow of her father. Even going last Sunday to Memphis and greeting all the fans she loved and cutting the cake that she always cut, or her children cut, or her mom cut. Singing happy birthday to her dad, who would have been 88. Um, and then going to support Boz and Austin to win the award for the movie Elvis, where he portrayed her dad so beautifully, being at the Golden Globes. She may have felt subconsciously like she had completed what she needed to do. She was in an awful depression, stuck in bargaining and depression, and still showing up for her daughters. The only thing she was living for was her daughters. But she wrote about how it was a constant emptiness, a constant pain, a constant ache that just, her soul was dead. Like when he died, when her son died, there was no coming back from that. And she was showing up at all the right places. She was being seen at all the right places. She was doing all the right things that would tell us she's on to acceptance and hope. But she wasn't at acceptance and hope for long, because she would go back down into depression, anger, denial. Same thing with Harry. He would show up at all the interviews, get married, be a father, be doing all the right things, right? Look like you're moving on, but then go back down again. So the cycle of depression, grief, the cycle of grief is all through this book. It's all through Lisa Marie's life. And these are the two people I've been thinking about the most. And I can kind of recognize this because I do this every year from 1992. I approach Dr. Martin Luther King weekend, a holiday. I always enjoyed doing acts of kindness, going to parades. I had a jacket that was all collection of Dr. Martin Luther King buttons that I used to wear. And by the time I was 30, I had like about 20 of them. It was just a long holiday that I really enjoyed, especially going to work to be a social worker. I always ended up at social justice parades and events and things that I was invited to. And it was just my very favorite holiday. And um, then a very traumatic event happened, a turn in my life. And as much as I can see the blessings in that whole situation, I still wish I could take an eraser and erase that weekend and do it over. So, but I've learned to not be really hard on myself. I've learned to not be hard on the people involved. I've learned to not say, I don't go back to, I mean, I still think, I wish I just had a big eraser and could do this and things were different. But I don't go through every little detail anymore and get angry at this person and that person for the decisions they made. So I don't do that to me either. I don't go, I'm angry. So that's kind of an improvement as I've been working through the stages. They never go away, the stages of grief. You go up, you down, you second guess yourself. You Grief is a true beast that is universal. We need to know the stages of it, but we also need to know when we're getting stuck in the stages of it. Harry is stuck in grief. That's what we're reading. Everybody wants to get all angry at him and everything. Little boy, little boy believes the media has killed his mom, the establishment, um, and now they're coming after Megan and him, and they've escaped it. But unless they get in line, they can't have a family, and um, everyone is against him. There's a lot of paranoia in this book. There's a lot of paranoia this man has. I will say, I've seen a lot of I've seen a lot of content out here where people are talking about him boasting about the number of people he killed in the war. That is not what he's doing. He um, there's something in military. I dated a captain in the military who taught strategy, and um, there is something they call war gaming, and it's sometimes it's done on a computer, but for safety reasons and everything, it's usually done on a board game. If you can think of something like chess or the game Battleship, it's a strategic game where you are plotting out, this is our territory. This is how many men or women or boots on ground we have. These are our weapons. This is our command post. This is how far we can go. This is where the enemy hangs out. This is how many people they have. This is how many different ways they can get to us. This is how many different ways they can imprison us, capture us, kill us, take out our men and women. And this is how many we can take out at a time. And then there is a part of, like, if we go here, but if we go here, so it is like moving on a chessboard. Like, if this person comes here, they could take out 3 people here. So actually, what he's doing in a very compassionate way is reasoning in his mind that board with the people he had to kill. Like, what is a reasonable amount that I could say in my conscience I could take out that wouldn't destroy 50 more men here or a bunch of civilians here? It's written very compassionately, and he does talk about, and it's not the British press. And I've seen him in interviews where he's saying, yeah, the British press is saying I'm boasting about it. No, everyone that reads it is saying it sounds weird. It's not smart to write about it. It's just not a smart thing to write about for security purposes for himself and his own family. There are things he writes about that are a little too much that I could see there would be issues about. Um, but it's not the British press that is like, oh my God, there's security thing. No, it's everyone that reads it. So, but what I do think is very compassionately written, that part. In the eyes of a wounded uh, veteran who maybe felt um, depressed for having to take human life. So there's that too. So he's got 2 kinds of grief going on, like grief from the war in Afghanistan, post-traumatic stress from that, and um, the post-trauma from his mother dying. And uh, always being surrounded by people that were grieving and remembering his mother. Lisa Marie, the same thing. Always, her dad was kept in the house for 3 days, and she was just aware of all the people fainting and screaming and crying, and she didn't know what to make of it. So being in the public eye is very, very difficult. Being in grief is very difficult. Grieving publicly is difficult. And people can die of a broken heart. They can will themselves to die. In Lisa Marie's case, she had an entire side of her family. We don't hear much about Priscilla's family, but we know that Elvis died at 42. His mother died at 46. Father, I think, was not very old either. I can't remember how old he was. His twin brother died. I mean, they had alcohol problems. They had obesity problems. They had drugs, alcohol, obesity, and heart problems. So huge fluctuations in weight where they would get really skinny, and then put on the pounds again. And I think that Lisa probably did that her whole life. We would see her really tiny and then puffed and blown up again, much like her dad. So I think you got to find your fit but thick or fit but fat weight, or your frail but fit, kind of like you're thin but fit, and stay there. The up and down is not good, the yo-yo dieting. And so that was very much part of her life. She may have yo-yo dieted a lot to get to the Golden Globes and appear okay and get to her father's event at Memphis. We don't know what mental gymnastics she had to do and physical gyrations to feel like she was going to be okay enough to be seen. Um, I don't think she was slurring. I've looked at the video 100 times. I don't hear her slurring. I hear her not being ready to answer questions. She's walking along and all of a sudden, what? She's also chewing on gum. She's making a whole lot of sense. She's very lucid. She's happy to be there. Her face looked different. She looked very pale. She looked almost waxy pale, like maybe under the lights. Her face looked longer. She looked gaunt, and her eyes looked dead. So that I believe Lisa died when her son Benjamin died, and she was still walking around. With Harry, I see anger, piercing anger. He's gone, gone, gone. This that burst of light, that spark in that child, it is archived. Um, so shock and denial, definitely what Harry is still in. Pain and guilt, Lisa Marie, pain and guilt. What if what if I was there that night? What if I didn't leave the house? What if, oh, this was the ultimate F you. You're not good enough. Nobody's good enough. I'm taking my life. What if what if my son never took a drug? What if I never took a drug? What if he wasn't around drugs? What if? Horrible grief, when your child dies and takes their own life. Horrible grief. Um, Depression. She said in her own words on Sunday, it's only her dad's fans that could get her out of the house to come celebrate his birthday. Um, why do people die close to their birthday or close to a loved one's birthday? We don't know. But we know that you have a greater chance of dying on your birthday, either from accidents, going to events, partying too much, overeating, over drinking, and then there's milestone birthdays where people actually do kill themselves. So what I want to say in this video more than anything is it's important for us to recognize that people can show up every day, smile, put their makeup on, put their suit on, go to interviews, giggle and laugh, make jokes, and still be broken inside and grieving and dying. And that's what I want to say about grief. Um, for me today, I finally finished um, all my little sweaters. All here, show you all of them. Well, I've got one more I've got to do some tidy work on. But I finished all my sweaters, and it really took me a long time to do these, which because they're so tiny, it took forever. Um, but I have a whole bunch of them now, little tiny, ugly sweaters. And I've got one I'm still working on over here. Um, but I have a bunch of little hats and a bunch of little mittens and um, little for my January theme tree. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to go ahead and decorate my theme tree for January. I've even got some heart. I got another little tiny one. I even got some hearts started for February. So that feels good. And more importantly, I have someone that needs me and is looking forward to me. By having a part-time job, I actually know someone's counting on me to show up. And I think that's really important. Um, Lisa Marie knew that the fans, Elvis, that the people that traveled to Memphis from all over the world were expecting to see the Presley family or Lisa. So she had a reason to show up. Harry, I worry about Harry because although he's father of beautiful children and a husband, he needs to show up for them. But being having lived in the public as much as he has, the public eye, I think what's missing for him is needing to show up for the public. There are events like his grandmother, the Queen's funeral, his grandfather's funeral, that people expect to see Harry. There will be the coronation in May of his father that people will expect to see him. But that he's living one event to the next to see the public is expecting him to show up. But this man is very much he needs help, proper help. Like the family, the royal family and palace or whoever has come out and said Harry is a victim of cult therapy. Meghan has gotten him into, and I think seeing the Netflix show where Harry and Meghan are sitting together yoga style with a life coach and going through meditations and affirmations that are all like, you are good enough. You are in peace. All is well. You can forgive yourself. You have done everything right. I mean, real obvious. Okay, it's kind of like a cult. Like everything you are thinking now is true. Um, I would say it's more of a new age, of what would have been called new age approach, where you're not going to be questioned. Your truth is your truth. What you think, your truth is true. Whether it's true or not, it's your truth. See, and this is what I get into the Me Too thing about is everybody has my truth. What we're basically saying is I have my perception on that. I have my experience, how I perceived it. That don't mean that's how it was. So that's what I keep hearing with this guy is this is how it is. And they're not going to say this is how it is. It's not a truther book. So this is my truth, and it may not be true, but this is how I experienced it. Um, but if anything, I would rename the book Grief. This man is grieving. Lisa Marie died of grief. Grief is something that we need to start paying attention to. People have delayed reactions to grief. People have awful reactions to grief. Some people don't eat. Some people never sleep. Some people start using drugs, start using alcohol. um, to cope. They self-medicate. Some people mask their own pain and they don't go to a doctor. Maybe something's going on with their body, but they're like numb to it. So, um, a whole lot of unhealthy things can happen in grief. It's really important to get help through the grieving process and understand that you don't go linear from 1 to 7 or 11, how many stages people have made models for. You can go back and forth your whole life. And you can get to acceptance and hope and reconstruction and hope and then go back. So it very much is a entire life process. So what I'm going to do today, what my plan is to decorate my tree. Um, I've got some peas soaking and lentils. I'm going to make split pea and lentil soup in my slow cooker, one right after the other. I got up early to do that and stocked my freezer full of lentil soup and split pea soup and vacuum and dust and clean and um, finish knitting and get everything on the tree. And then tomorrow I'm going to work. And I know that I have to work tomorrow. Um, so having something to go to that you're expected to go to is really important for anybody that's depressed, anybody that's ever had suicidal thoughts or self-harming, or anybody that's going through grief and even a grief anniversary date. Not avoiding the people that were around that date. It's not hating on those people. It's not hating on yourself. It, it's moving forward in a different way, acknowledging that's a part, that's a learning part of your life and continuing to move on. So, I wish everyone that is grieving today, a step forward and to keep on dreaming because that's what Dr. Martin Luther King would have wanted to realize you have a dream and um, dreams do come true. And to do an act of kindness, get outside of yourself and um, and you might not feel good doing it. It's not, everybody says, well, if you get outside of yourself and you do something for someone else, you'll feel better. Actually, sometimes you don't feel better, but in the long run, it's better. You've gotten past another anniversary date or a time of grief that could have sunk you. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on Spare. Thoughts on Lisa Marie's life is my thoughts are just with her children and her mother and her ex-husbands right now. And very sad. Okay, that's my video, everyone. Take care. Be kind to yourself. I made myself a hot chocolate this morning. First thing this morning, I was like, I'm making a hot chocolate. That would be a naughty food for me, but I'm gonna be naughty and have a hot chocolate and enjoy it. Um, so do some self-care. And my thoughts are with Harry and Meghan too. I think this book was written when his grandfather died, when Prince Philip died. I can't imagine if he would have ever put this book out if his grandmother was still alive. I do not think he would have put this book out with the Queen still alive. I think he wrote it, he got a ghostwriter, he wrote it right after his grandfather died, knowing the Queen would die soon, and put it on hold. Um, very strategic, very strategic. The ball is in their court. Um, and it is a book of grief. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye bye.